January 22, 2008. 8 a.m. Manhattan. No screams. No violence. No farewell note. Just a silent apartment and a 28-year-old body on a bed. Heath Ledger was dead. Weeks before his death, he was sleeping less than 2 hours a night. At 28, while most actors were still chasing relevance, he had just completed what would become the most iconic villain performance in cinema history. So how does a man reach the absolute peak and disappear in silence the same year? In the final months of his life, Heath Ledger was sleeping less than 2 hours a night. Not occasionally. Almost every night. His body was exhausted, but his mind refused to shut down. After finishing The Dark Knight, he admitted to people close to him that the character didn't end when filming stopped. The Joker stayed. The voice stayed. The laugh stayed. Silence only made it louder. There were no parties. No scandals. No public collapse. From the outside, Heath looked focused and in control. He was still working. Still planning future projects. But weeks without real sleep slowly eroded him. Concentration slipped. Balance faded. Rest became impossible. And when rest disappears long enough, survival replaces everything else. That's when prescription medication entered his routine. Not to escape reality. Not to feel more. Just to sleep. Everything was legally prescribed. Sleeping aids. Anti-anxiety medication. Painkillers. Individually, none of them raised alarms. Together, they created a quiet danger. No warning moment. No dramatic breakdown. Just a body pushed beyond recovery. On January 22, 2008, those medications met in one exhausted system at the wrong time. No note. No evidence of intent. The death was ruled accidental. Clinically accurate. But incomplete. Because accidents rarely appear out of nowhere. So if this wasn't suicide, what was it? At what point does discipline become danger? And when obsession replaces rest, who notices before it's too late? Long before fame, long before Hollywood, the pattern was already forming. Heath Ledger grew up in Perth, Australia, far from cameras and expectations, in a childhood that looked stable but fractured early. His parents divorced when he was young. There was no scandal, no chaos, no dramatic collapse. The house simply became quieter. Heath didn't rebel. He adapted. Silence became familiar, and familiarity became habit. He wasn't loud or dominant. He watched more than he spoke. He learned people by observing them, not confronting them. That inward focus didn't make him fragile. It made him self-contained. But self-contained can slowly turn into isolated when there's nowhere to release what's building inside. Heath learned to manage emotion by internalizing it, by holding it in until it had somewhere safer to go. Acting became that place. Not ambition. Not attention. Refuge. Inside a role, emotions had structure. Lines had limits. Feelings had purpose. Outside a role, none of that existed. When Heath became someone else, the noise inside him softened. The world made sense for a moment. Over time, that relief stopped being temporary. It became necessary. As a teenager, he left school early. Not because of failure. Not because success was guaranteed. He left because standing still felt unbearable. Acting wasn't a career calculation. It was motion. Forward movement kept the silence manageable. There was no backup plan, no safety net, no alternative path waiting if this didn't work. From the beginning, Heath committed fully, the way people do when half measures feel impossible. When he left Australia to pursue acting more seriously, he wasn't chasing fame. He was escaping stillness. New cities, new roles, new identities gave him focus. Each one offered temporary relief. But relief is not balance. And Heath never learned the difference. Movement replaced rest. Immersion replaced recovery. Early success didn't ground him. It sharpened him. Directors noticed his intensity. Co-stars noticed how difficult it was for him to switch off. But intensity was rewarded. Depth was praised. No one asked how he came back from roles, only how deep he could go next. The industry celebrates disappearance, not return. What looked like dedication was also conditioning. Heath was training himself to erase the line between character and self. Each role left residue. Something stayed behind when filming ended. He didn't see this as a warning sign. To him, it was proof that the work mattered. You don't detach early. You don't protect yourself. You endure. This pattern didn't come from ego. It came from survival. Acting solved a problem for Heath long before it became a profession. It gave him direction. It gave him control. It gave him a way to manage emotions he didn't know how to face directly. But a refuge can quietly become a dependency, especially when the world rewards you for never stepping out of it. By the time fame arrived, the foundation was already set. Heath didn't build his career on versatility alone. He built it on intensity, immersion, and disappearance. Success didn't correct the imbalance. It magnified it. Bigger roles demanded deeper commitment. Deeper commitment left less space to return to himself. These were the early cracks. Not loud. Not visible. Structural. A young man who learned early that disappearing into roles worked, and never learned how to come back out. So when darker roles began to appear, when characters demanded psychological extremes instead of emotional shelter, the system that once protected him would no longer be enough. And that leaves one question hanging. If acting had been Heath Ledger's refuge since childhood, what happens when the roles stop protecting him, and start asking for everything instead? When Heath Ledger arrived in Hollywood, the industry didn't see depth. It saw potential. Marketable. Safe. Attractive. He was young, handsome, and easy to place. The roles came quickly, but they came with a condition. He would be framed as the charming lead. The romantic face. The boy audiences could trust. For the studio system, that was enough. For Heath Ledger, it was a cage. Early success locked the label in place. Teen films. Light roles. Box office wins that required very little of him emotionally. The films performed. The audiences responded. And yet, something felt wrong. Heath wasn't struggling for work. He was struggling for meaning. The industry rewarded him for being visible, not for being honest. And every time he accepted another safe role, the gap between who he was and how he was seen grew wider. Hollywood didn't misjudge his talent. It underestimated his hunger. Heath didn't want to be liked. He wanted to be taken seriously. He wanted roles that demanded something from him, roles that hurt, roles that forced him inward instead of keeping him polished on the surface. But the more successful he became, the harder it was to escape the image that success created. The system doesn't encourage reinvention. It protects what already sells. That tension turned inward. Heath began rejecting roles that would have solidified his status. He walked away from safety without knowing what would replace it. Not because he was reckless, but because comfort terrified him more than failure. Being seen incorrectly felt worse than not being seen at all. So he chose uncertainty. He chose risk. He chose roles that made studios nervous and agents uncomfortable. From the outside, it looked like a career gamble. From the inside, it was survival. Heath wasn't trying to destroy his image. He was trying to escape it. Every no was an attempt to break the mold before it hardened permanently. He didn't want to be trapped playing versions of himself that didn't exist. He wanted characters with weight, with damage, with silence. The irony is that Hollywood rewarded him even as it misunderstood him. Each bold choice brought more attention, but not always the kind he wanted. Praise came, but it stayed shallow. Interviews focused on his looks. Marketing focused on his charm. The deeper he went, the louder the surface-level narrative became. And that disconnect fed the same pattern that had followed him since childhood. When the outside world didn't reflect the inside, he disappeared further inward. This is where the trap closed. The industry labeled him incorrectly, and the only way out was to prove them wrong through extremes. Heath didn't seek balance. He sought contrast. If they saw light, he would bring darkness. If they expected ease, he would deliver discomfort. Every role became a statement. Every performance, a correction. But proving yourself through intensity comes with a cost. The deeper he went to escape the label, the harder it became to step back. Hollywood doesn't guide actors through transformation. It applauds the result and moves on. And Heath, wired for immersion without exits, absorbed that pressure completely. By the time the industry began to recognize his depth, the damage was already forming. The wrong label had done its work. It pushed him toward risk, toward isolation, toward roles that demanded everything instead of some things. And once that path was chosen, there was no turning back to safety. Because when the world refuses to see who you are, sometimes the only option is to become something it can't ignore. And the question that follows is dangerous. How far do you have to go before being seen finally costs more than being misunderstood? If being misunderstood pushed Heath Ledger toward extremes, Brokeback Mountain was the point where there was no way back. When the script arrived, Hollywood saw risk. Career risk. Image risk. Commercial risk. A romantic lead playing a gay cowboy in early 2000s America was not a safe move. Agents warned him. Studios hesitated. The audience he had been marketed to was expected to disappear. The label he was trying to escape could finally collapse, or take him down with it. So the question was simple and dangerous. Would he protect the career he had, or destroy it to become the actor he believed he was? He didn't hesitate. Heath Ledger accepted immediately. Not because he wanted controversy. Because the role demanded restraint, silence, and emotional repression, the exact opposite of everything Hollywood had projected onto him. Ennis Delmar wasn't charming. He wasn't expressive. He barely spoke. His pain lived in pauses, in posture, in what never escaped his mouth. This wasn't a performance designed to impress. It was designed to hurt quietly. On set, Heath worked with a level of seriousness that unsettled people. He wasn't performing emotion for the camera. He was containing it. Every scene was built around what Ennis refused to say. The grief. The fear. The shame. Heath carried it internally, scene after scene, without release. And because he didn't externalize it, he didn't shed it when the day ended. The character stayed compressed inside him. When the film was released, the reaction split instantly. Critics were stunned. Hollywood recalibrated. The same industry that had reduced him to surface appeal suddenly spoke in different language. Gravitas. Depth. Restraint. Heath Ledger was nominated for an Academy Award. The label cracked. The escape seemed complete. But something else happened at the same time. The role changed how Heath was wired to work. Brokeback Mountain proved that disappearing inward produced results. The quieter he became, the more powerful the performance felt. The more he suppressed, the more audiences leaned in. Success didn't teach him balance. It reinforced the pattern that had followed him since childhood. Go deeper. Hold more inside. Don't release it. Endure. Off camera, Heath became more private. More contained. He didn't talk much about the role, but people close to him noticed the shift. He carried Ennis longer than expected. Not as sadness. As weight. The kind that doesn't announce itself but changes how you move through the world. The film opened doors, but it also confirmed something dangerous. That the cost of depth was invisible, and therefore easy to ignore. So when Heath Ledger proved he could destroy a false image and survive, another question replaced the first. If this level of internal sacrifice worked once, how far could it go? And what would happen when a role demanded not silence, but chaos? The success of Brokeback Mountain didn't release Heath Ledger. It refined him. The industry finally saw his depth, but it saw the result, not the cost. Critics praised the restraint. Audiences responded to the pain held just beneath the surface. What no one talked about was how that restraint had rewired the way Heath Ledger approached his craft. He learned that the more he withheld, the more powerful the performance became. Silence wasn't just effective. It was rewarded. This was the moment the pattern hardened. Heath stopped viewing roles as something you step into and out of. He began treating them as internal states you inhabit until they leave on their own. And sometimes, they didn't. Ennis Delmar wasn't explosive. He didn't scream. He didn't break down. He endured. And endurance became the lesson Heath carried forward. Pain didn't need release. It needed containment. After Brokeback Mountain, Heath gained something he had been chasing for years: respect. But respect came with expectation. The world no longer wanted the charming lead. It wanted gravity, darkness, transformation. Every next role had to go deeper than the last. And Heath, wired for immersion, didn't resist that pressure. He leaned into it. Privately, he became harder to read. Not distant. Compressed. Friends noticed how much time he spent alone between projects. How he retreated inward instead of outward. He wasn't unhappy. He was focused. Focused in a way that left little room for recovery. Roles no longer felt like jobs. They felt like obligations to something internal that demanded constant feeding. This is where the breaking point becomes visible in retrospect. Brokeback Mountain didn't damage Heath Ledger. It validated a dangerous truth. That going inward worked. That sacrificing comfort produced excellence. That you could disappear and be applauded for it. The film didn't push him into darkness. It taught him how effective darkness could be. So when the next opportunity arrived, one that didn't ask for restraint, but for chaos, the path was already prepared. Heath didn't need convincing to go further. He had already proven to himself that survival wasn't the priority. Truth was. Depth was. Impact was. And that brings the story to the edge of something irreversible. Because Ennis Del Mar required suppression. The next role would require explosion. Not silence, but disorder. Not pain held in, but chaos let loose. If Brokeback Mountain taught Heath how to disappear quietly, the question now was what would happen when disappearing meant losing control entirely. So the real legacy of Brokeback Mountain isn't just that it broke an image. It taught Heath Ledger that the most powerful performances come from places you don't return from easily. And once that lesson is learned, there's no such thing as a safe role anymore. After Brokeback Mountain, Heath Ledger didn't change direction. He intensified it. The industry finally spoke the language he wanted to hear: respect, seriousness, depth, but it also raised the stakes. From that point on, every role was expected to transform him. Not subtly. Completely. And for Heath Ledger, transformation had never been a surface exercise. It was internal, immersive, and absolute. This is where method acting stopped being a technique and became a way of functioning. Heath didn't approach roles as temporary states. He entered them as environments. Psychological climates he lived inside for months. He didn't rehearse emotions. He built them into his nervous system. And once built, they didn't disappear just because the camera stopped rolling. People around him noticed the shift. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't dramatic. He was focused to the point of isolation. Preparation became more intense. Downtime became rare. Between projects, instead of decompressing, he stayed inward. As if stepping back into himself required more energy than he had. The line between work and identity blurred quietly, without a moment anyone could point to and say, "This is where it went wrong." Heath didn't believe in shortcuts. He believed in immersion. To him, method acting wasn't about suffering for art. It was about truth. If a character was broken, he needed to understand that break from the inside. If a character lived in fear, he needed to feel how that fear rewired behavior. He didn't simulate states of mind. He inhabited them. And the deeper he went, the less space remained for recovery. This approach brought praise. Directors admired his commitment. Co-stars spoke about his intensity. Critics celebrated the realism. No one asked what it cost. The system doesn't reward balance. It rewards results. And Heath delivered results consistently. So the cycle reinforced itself. Go deeper. Stay longer. Don't pull back. If it hurts, you're doing it right. But there was a flaw in that logic. The human nervous system doesn't reset on command. You can't switch off psychological extremes just because production ends. Heath began carrying residue from one role into the next. Not consciously. Physically. Sleep became lighter. Thoughts lingered longer. Silence grew heavier. These weren't warning signs he recognized as danger. They felt like side effects of doing the work properly. By this point, rest was no longer restorative. Time off didn't reset him. It exposed him. Without a character to occupy his mind, the noise returned. Thoughts overlapped. Ideas raced. The internal pressure he had learned to manage through immersion now demanded constant engagement. And when the mind doesn't slow naturally, the body eventually looks for artificial ways to do it. This was the stage where exhaustion became structural. Not a bad week. Not a stressful shoot. A baseline condition. Heath wasn't burned out in the traditional sense. He was over-engaged. Over-identified. His sense of self had fused too tightly with the work. When acting went well, he felt anchored. When it stopped, he felt unmoored. What made this especially dangerous was how invisible it all was. Heath didn't present as unstable. He didn't collapse publicly. He didn't ask for help. He was articulate, thoughtful, calm. From the outside, he looked disciplined. Controlled. In reality, control had become the problem. Everything was being held in. Nothing was being released. This is where method acting loses its exit. When the process no longer ends with the role. When preparation replaces identity. When rest feels less safe than immersion. Heath had built his career on disappearing into characters. Now, stepping out of them felt unfamiliar. Almost threatening. The tragedy is that none of this felt wrong to him at the time. It felt consistent. Logical. He wasn't spiraling. He was refining. Preparing. Advancing. Each role demanded more psychological commitment than the last, and he met that demand without hesitation. Because hesitation, to him, felt like dishonesty. By the time the next role arrived, the one that wouldn't ask for restraint, but for chaos, Heath Ledger was already primed. He had trained himself to live inside darkness without exits. He had learned that excellence came from places that were uncomfortable, unstable, and unsustainable. And he had proven, again and again, that he could survive it. Or so it seemed. Because obsession doesn't announce itself as danger. It announces itself as dedication. And when dedication is constantly rewarded, there's no external reason to stop. The system applauds. The audience praises. The work improves. And the cost accumulates quietly, in places no one films. So when Heath stepped toward the role that would demand total psychological disorder, the question wasn't whether he was ready. The question was whether he still knew how to protect himself at all. And that leads directly to what comes next. Because the next role didn't ask him to hold pain inside. It asked him to unleash it. To embody chaos. To live without moral structure. To erase boundaries completely. And once you've trained yourself to disappear without exits, what happens when the character you step into is pure disorder? The Joker didn't arrive as a role. It arrived as a challenge. When Christopher Nolan offered Heath Ledger the part, the reaction was immediate disbelief. Fans questioned it. Studios hesitated. Critics mocked the idea before a single frame was shot. Heath Ledger, the actor known for restraint and silence, cast as the most chaotic villain in comic book history. On the surface, it looked like miscasting. In reality, it was an invitation to go further than he ever had. Heath didn't approach the Joker as a character with a backstory. He saw him as a philosophy. Disorder without motive. Violence without meaning. A man who didn't want money, power, or revenge, only proof that the world was as fragile as he believed. To play that truthfully, Heath knew he couldn't rely on technique alone. He needed to live inside it. Preparation began in isolation. Heath locked himself away for weeks before filming. No distractions. No social contact. Just notebooks, mirrors, and ideas spiraling inward. He kept a journal written from the Joker's perspective. Not plot notes. Not dialogue. Thoughts. Impulses. Fragments of cruelty and humor with no moral anchor. He wasn't designing a performance. He was constructing a mental environment and placing himself inside it. The physical transformation was only the surface. The voice. The posture. The erratic movements. Those came later. What mattered was mindset. Heath trained himself to respond as the Joker would, unpredictably, without hesitation, without empathy. That meant unlearning control. Letting go of order. Allowing impulses to surface without filtering them through comfort or safety. For an actor already wired for immersion, this was not a small step forward. It was a leap into instability. On set, the effect was immediate. Co-stars spoke about how difficult it was to anticipate him. Scenes didn't feel rehearsed. They felt volatile. Heath didn't break character easily. The Joker wasn't something he turned on for the camera. He stayed present between takes. Not performing. Existing. The line between actor and role blurred further each day. What made this especially dangerous was how effective it was. Every choice worked. Every risk translated to the screen. Nolan gave him freedom because the results demanded it. The performance wasn't just good. It was unsettling. Magnetic. Alive. And the more the Joker took shape, the more confirmation Heath received that going this deep was the right decision. But there was a cost forming beneath the surface. The Joker didn't operate with restraint. He didn't suppress emotion. He released it without consequence. For a man who had spent years learning how to contain pain, this role demanded the opposite. Explosion instead of endurance. Chaos instead of control. And Heath didn't toggle between those states. He transitioned fully. By the time filming progressed, the Joker wasn't something Heath visited. It was something he inhabited. The laughter didn't feel rehearsed. The menace didn't feel calculated. It felt immediate. Instinctive. And instincts, once trained, don't disappear when the camera cuts. This is where the descent truly begins. Because creating chaos convincingly requires you to stop protecting yourself from it. And Heath Ledger had already trained himself to remove exits. So the question now wasn't whether he could deliver the performance. He already was. The real question was whether anyone, not the studio, not the director, not Heath himself, understood what happens when an actor wired for disappearance steps fully into a character built entirely from disorder. As filming continued, the Joker stopped being a performance and became a constant state. Heath Ledger didn't switch on between takes. He stayed present. Not method acting as spectacle, but as default. Crew members described an unease they couldn't explain. Not fear. Uncertainty. They never knew which version of him they would face in a scene, because neither did he. Reactions weren't rehearsed. They were instinctive. And instinct is powerful when it works, but dangerous when it's fed every day. The Joker demanded disorder. No rules. No emotional center. No recovery. Heath trained himself to remove filters. To let impulses surface without resistance. The more he did it, the easier it became. Chaos stopped feeling foreign. It felt natural. And when something feels natural, the body stops defending against it. The role wasn't draining him in obvious ways. It was reshaping how his mind operated. Sleep began to collapse. Not dramatically. Gradually. Nights shortened. Thoughts raced. The adrenaline that fueled the performance didn't turn off when filming ended. Silence became hostile. Rest felt unreachable. Heath didn't talk about it publicly. He joked about exhaustion. Downplayed it. The work mattered more than comfort. It always had. What made the situation more dangerous was the feedback loop. The deeper he went, the stronger the performance became. Nolan trusted him more. The camera lingered. Scenes expanded. The Joker dominated the film. Every validation confirmed the same lesson Heath had learned before: going further works. There was no external signal telling him to stop. Only applause waiting at the end. But the Joker didn't operate within normal psychological limits. He wasn't just angry or broken. He was untethered. He laughed without joy. He hurt without reason. To live inside that headspace for months required Heath to suspend parts of himself that normally regulate behavior. Empathy. Predictability. Control. Those aren't switches you flip casually. They are systems you weaken over time. By the end of production, the line between character and self was dangerously thin. Heath didn't exit the Joker cleanly. There was no decompression period. No gradual return. The work wrapped. The chaos didn't. The laughter, the agitation, the sleeplessness followed him beyond the set. He had built a character that lived without order, and now his mind struggled to find it again. People later asked if the Joker broke Heath Ledger. That question oversimplifies something more unsettling. The Joker didn't break him. It met him at a point where his defenses were already gone. Years of immersion without exits had prepared him perfectly for a role with no boundaries. And perfection, in this case, was the problem. When filming ended, Heath was praised, celebrated, reassured. But praise doesn't restore balance. And recognition doesn't reverse psychological strain. He carried the performance forward into the quiet months that followed. Without a role to focus on, the internal noise grew louder. The same mind that had delivered brilliance now refused to slow down. This is the point no camera captured. No behind-the-scenes footage shows what happens after the masterpiece is completed. The Joker was finished. The work was done. But Heath Ledger was still inside the environment he had built. And environments don't disappear just because the lights go out. So when people later searched for a single cause, a single moment, a single mistake, they missed the truth hiding in plain sight. The descent didn't happen suddenly. It happened because everything he did worked. The performance succeeded. The method delivered. The chaos translated perfectly to the screen. And when success rewards the removal of limits, the cost is paid quietly, afterward, when there's no character left to contain what's been unleashed. When the Dark Knight wrapped, the work was finished. The chaos on screen was complete. But for Heath Ledger, nothing truly ended. There was no moment of release. No clear transition back into ordinary life. The role that demanded disorder didn't leave behind silence. It left momentum. And momentum, without direction, turns inward. Heath never saw the film. He never sat in a dark theater and watched the audience react to what he had created. He never heard the stunned laughter, the nervous quiet, the disbelief. The world was preparing to celebrate him while he was already dealing with the aftermath alone. The performance existed now without him. And the separation between achievement and experience became another quiet fracture. In the months after filming, Heath tried to move forward. He took on new projects. He stayed productive. From the outside, it looked like momentum. Inside, it was maintenance. Sleep didn't return to normal. Nights remained short and restless. Thoughts overlapped. The mind that had been trained to live inside chaos didn't recognize stillness as safe. When there was nothing to focus on, the noise intensified. This wasn't collapse. It was endurance. Heath didn't dramatize his struggle. He didn't announce it. He managed it the same way he managed everything else, privately. Medication became part of the routine, not as indulgence, but as regulation. Something to slow the mind enough to rest. Everything he took was prescribed. Everything appeared controlled. But control, at this stage, was fragile. What made this period especially dangerous was how invisible it was. There was no public unraveling. No obvious warning signs. Heath was thoughtful, articulate, still engaged with the world. He wasn't spiraling outward. He was compressing inward. The exhaustion accumulated quietly, without spectacle. And exhaustion, when prolonged, distorts judgment without announcing itself. At the same time, the weight of expectation began to form. Industry insiders spoke about his Joker in absolutes. Unrepeatable. Definitive. Iconic. Before the film even released, the performance had already become legend. And legends leave no room for normal follow-ups. Whatever came next would be measured against something that couldn't be surpassed. That pressure didn't inflate Heath's ego. It narrowed his options. The question was no longer what role he wanted to play, but how anything could exist after this. Success at that level doesn't stabilize. It isolates. The peak becomes a place you can't revisit and can't descend from easily. And Heath, wired for depth without exits, felt that weight acutely. There's a particular danger that comes after a masterpiece. The work demands everything. Then it leaves you alone with whatever remains. For Heath Ledger, what remained was exhaustion, expectation, and a mind that had forgotten how to rest. The character was gone, but the habits required to sustain it were not. Chaos had been useful for too long to disappear on command. On January 22, 2008, the medications meant to help him sleep interacted in a way his exhausted system couldn't survive. No note. No plan. No final statement. The death was ruled accidental. Medically accurate. But emotionally incomplete. Because nothing about the months leading up to that morning was sudden. The tragedy isn't that Heath Ledger died at 28. The tragedy is that he reached the highest level of artistic success and didn't live long enough to experience its impact, or recover from its cost. The masterpiece stood. The man didn't. After The Dark Knight was released, the world responded exactly as predicted. Standing ovations. Critical acclaim. Cultural dominance. And an Academy Award awarded after his death. The recognition arrived perfectly timed for the legacy, and impossibly late for the person. Which forces the final reflection of this chapter. What happens when an artist gives everything to the work, and the work gives nothing back when it's over? When the applause comes after silence? And when the system that celebrates depth has no mechanism to protect the people who deliver it? Because The Dark Knight wasn't the end of Heath Ledger's talent. It was the end of his ability to recover from it. The world understood Heath Ledger's legacy only after he was gone. Shock faded into silence, and silence left behind a question no headline could answer. How does someone so disciplined, so respected, disappear just as the world is about to celebrate him? When The Dark Knight was released, many blamed the Joker. But the truth is more uncomfortable. Heath Ledger wasn't destroyed by one role. He was shaped by a pattern. A lifetime of going deeper, staying longer, and never building an exit. The Joker didn't create that habit. It exposed it. After his death, the praise arrived instantly. Universal acclaim. Standing ovations. An Academy Award he never lived to receive. The recognition was real, but it came too late to protect the person behind the work. Applause after death costs nothing. Care during life does. Heath Ledger's legacy is not just a masterpiece on screen. It's a warning off-screen. A reminder that dedication without boundaries becomes danger. That depth without recovery turns into erosion. And that a system that celebrates results while ignoring cost will eventually lose the very people it praises. There is nothing romantic about exhaustion. Nothing poetic about a mind that never rests. Heath didn't chase destruction. He chased truth, and no one stopped him from going too far. In the end, his story leaves one question behind. How much of yourself can you give to your work before there's nothing left to protect? Because some artists change the world through what they create, and others change it through the silence they leave behind. Is art worth sacrificing one's life for, or does genius always come at a price?